The announcement came on a Tuesday, slipped into the folds of my morning newspaper, a small, professional-looking cardstock rectangle. The estate of Evelyn Reed invites you to a private viewing of a new acquisition. Below it, my name. My full, legal name. Jonathan Reed. The problem was, I was Jonathan Reed, and my estate wasn't having any viewing. The address was a gallery in the city, a place I knew well. It was the same gallery where, 15 years ago, my wife Evelyn had her first solo exhibition, the same gallery where our daughter Clara, then just a toddler, had toddled between the legs of critics, smearing her jammy hand on a minimalist sculpture. It was the gallery that had launched them both. They were the artists. I was the man who paid for the framing. The man in the rearview mirror staring back at me was a ghost, grayer, thinner, with eyes that had spent years looking at nothing but the inside of a shipping container. I'd been a logistics executive, a man who made things move. Then, on a trip to oversee a new port in Southeast Asia, I'd been in the wrong place at the wrong time, a political upheaval, a case of mistaken identity, and I simply vanished. For a month, the world thought I was dead. My company, under immense pressure, paid a ransom my kidnappers had never even demanded. It was a chaotic, terrifying mess. By the time I was released, the story had shifted. I was a liability, an embarrassment. My company settled with me under a mountain of non-disclosure agreements, and I came home with the trauma so deep I couldn't even speak its name. But the month I was gone, that was the real vanishing act. Evelyn and Clara hadn't just grieved, they had erased me. When I finally walked through the door of our sprawling suburban home, I expected relief, tears, a desperate embrace. Instead, I got shock, and not the good kind. Evelyn, already a rising star in the art world, looked at me like I was an intruder. Clara, who was 7, hid behind her mother's legs. The house was different. My study was now a yoga room. My favorite armchair was gone. My photographs, my books, the small, silly trophies from my company's softball league, all gone. It was as if a Jonathan-shaped hole had been cut out of the house, and then the edges had been neatly sewn together. Evelyn, ever the pragmatist, explained it in the sterile language of grief. The doctors said it was healthier for Clara. A clean break. We had to move on, Jonathan. We had to survive. Survive. They had survived by deleting me, the man who had worked 60-hour weeks to pay for her art supplies, for Clara's private school, for this very house. I was a ghost haunting a home that no longer remembered me. The love was still there, a roaring, painful thing in my chest, but it had no place to land. It bounced off their polite smiles and the hollow silence of my erased existence. I couldn't stay. The pain of being alive but unseen was worse than the fear I'd felt in captivity. I left, not with a fight, but with a quiet, devastating acceptance. I moved to a small coastal town, took a menial job at a marina, and spent my days fixing boat engines and my nights trying to forget the two faces that had looked at me like a stranger. I sent letters to Clara for years, but they were returned, unopened. Evelyn had built a new life, a successful life, and I was the messy, inconvenient prologue she'd edited out. And now, this. I almost threw the invitation away. It was cruel, a taunt, but the next day, another one came, and the next, a different piece of mail. A different reference, but always the same message, my name, her gallery. It felt like a summons. Curiosity, that most dangerous of emotions, got the better of me. The gallery was a sleek, white cube of a space. The private viewing was in a back room away from the main floor. As I approached, I could hear a low murmur of voices, the clink of wine glasses. I felt like an imposter in my worn corduroy jacket. I pushed open the heavy door. The room fell silent. Evelyn stood near a pedestal, a glass of champagne frozen halfway to her lips. She was older, her hair now a distinguished silver, but her eyes held that same sharp, appraising look. And beside her, a young woman. She had my mother's auburn hair and my own stubborn chin. Clara, she must have been 22. For a moment, no one moved. I saw a flicker of something in Evelyn's eyes. Not recognition, but the shock of seeing a ghost made flesh. Clara just stared, her face unreadable. Then Evelyn's composure snapped back into place. She gave a tight, social smile. Jonathan, you got the invitation. It wasn't a question. I did, I said, my voice raspy from disuse. Your estate. I wasn't aware you had acquired anything of mine. Evelyn gestured towards the pedestal. Not of yours. For you. I stepped forward, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. On the pedestal, under a soft spotlight, was a small framed object. It wasn't a painting or a sculpture. It was a collage, and it was made of me. My eyes scanned the chaotic, beautiful mosaic. There was a faded photo of me holding a newborn Clara, my face alight with terrified joy. There was a page from my old pocket diary with my messy handwriting listing Clara's doctor, 3 p.m. There was the label from a bottle of my favorite whiskey, a ticket stub from a Broadway show Evelyn and I had seen, a pressed flower from a garden I used to tend, hundreds of tiny fragments of a life that had been thrown away, but here they were, preserved, curated, made into art. This is the piece, Clara said, her voice soft but steady. It was the first time I'd heard her voice in 15 years. It's called The Erasure. I looked from the collage to her. Tears were welling in her eyes. Mom told me you left. She said it was too hard for you to stay. For years that was my truth, but then I started to remember things. Not memories she gave me, but feelings. The smell of your coffee in the morning, the way you'd sing off-key to the radio in the car, the feel of your stubble when you'd kiss me goodnight. Evelyn looked away, her face pale. I started asking questions, Clara continued, her gaze never leaving mine. I found old boxes in the attic, letters you'd written to me, bank statements with your name on them. I started to see the shape of the hole you'd left, and I realized it wasn't you who did the erasing. The silence in the room was absolute. It was just the three of us, standing in the debris of the life we'd failed to live. I found your address a year ago, Clara said, a tear finally escaping down her cheek. I've driven past your marina a dozen times. I was too scared, so I made this instead. I wanted to rebuild you, piece by piece. I wanted you to know that even though Mom tried to make you disappear, you were always the foundation of my story. I just didn't know it until I started digging. I couldn't speak. I reached out a trembling hand and touched the glass of the frame. Underneath it, nestled among the other artifacts, was a crayon drawing of a stick figure family. A tall stick figure, a medium one, and a tiny one. Underneath, in a child's wobbly handwriting, it said, "My Daddy." The tears I'd held back for 15 years finally came. I looked past the collage, past Clara, and met Evelyn's eyes. Hers were wet too. There was no apology in them. Not yet. Just a profound, ancient sorrow. She hadn't just erased me from her life. She had tried to erase me from our daughters, and in doing so, she had wounded Clara in a way that was only now healing. Clara took a tentative step toward me, then another. She was no longer the 7-year-old hiding behind her mother's legs. She was a woman, an artist, who had painstakingly reconstructed her father from the scraps of a discarded past. "Hi, Dad," she whispered. The word hung in the air, a sound more beautiful than any music. And in that gallery, surrounded by the shards of my old life, I finally came home. The return wasn't to a house or a marriage. It was to a daughter who had refused to let me be a ghost, and that was a homecoming far greater than anything I could have ever imagined.